Yeah, that's just one of those things. I think that everything's changing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's changing. We have no idea what's going to change. And I see people just holding on to, the way things have been.
Well, and that way was shitty. That way got us here. And I think people forget the way that things used to be ignored poor people. Oh, right on, thank you. It ignored
economic inequality, social inequality.
It ignored women. It ignored people of color. It ignored the Native Americans. All of the populations that are now trying to tell middle-class Americans how to deal with this stuff that everybody else has been dealing with constantly is like the wake-up call that we needed to say the way before was affecting a shitload of people in a negative way. Now we can say we're not going to be oil dependent. We're not going to have commuting where not necessary, because I don't know if people realize how much less pollution there's happening right now with all the cars not traveling. It's like noticeably...
It's global. It's...
the air is better.
Like, I was looking at pictures of Venice recently, and apparently marine life is returning to the canals. Like, people have seen dolphins swimming in the canals, and they haven't been able to see that in years because of all the trash.
Yeah, I mean...
Who'd have thunk it? Tourism bleeds trash into the local ecosystem.
Well, it's just like all these people flushing hand sanitizers now, creating another problem.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's where, again, it's like Americans just they had a throwaway, disposable culture that led us here.
Yeah.
People were disposable. Humans got thrown away as part of the culture.
So,
and
I just want to throw in some perspective. Right now, according to Johns Hopkins, there are 318,600 plus confirmed cases. And in the United States, there are 38,140 cases. And there are 13,931 new cases today.
Jesus.
So, we're... Our total cases per population of 1 million is at 115. And also, for some perspective, China is, let's see, where is China on this list? China only has 56 cases total per 1 million population. And granted, they have 81,000 total cases. But they've got, over 1 billion people to contend with.
So here's another issue, population density.
Yeah, population density is huge.
Well, and people are like...
a huge factor, I mean.
Right. People are like, why are so many more people dying in Italy than everywhere else? So first off, they have the oldest population in Europe.
They literally live on top of each other.
Yeah, they have a higher population density than both America and China. And then the median age in Italy is 47 versus both China and America with the median age of 38.
Yeah.
And then... In Italy, 99% of the cases in which people died, they already had pre-existing conditions. And then it's like, I think it's 80% of the people who are then in critical infection stage are like over 50. Yeah. So there's all these things about the infection.
Well, there are also behavioral patterns that are different in Italy too. That's my understanding is that Italian culture is much more communal.
Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
So, right now, the top, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just go with the top 5. It's United States, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Iran are in the top 5. And these countries all have over 20,000 cases. Italy has 59,000. They're quickly approaching the number of China. Mm-hmm. And that's an incredibly small population compared to China. And so let's just look at the 3 in Europe, Italy, Spain, and Germany. These are cultures that have been there for millennia. at this point. They've been around for a long time. These are old societies. And so working with geographic limitations and maximizing efficiency of space, they've all managed to pack incredibly large or high densities of people into these are big cities, but these big cities are not like in America. In America, our big cities are hours apart.
Yeah.
I mean, not just hours, but like several hours, and you got to stop and refill your car or your gas tank. In Europe, these things are much closer. All of Europe fits in like the eastern half of the United States for the most part, and so it's a very different, just very different social conditions. I mean, it might look similar, but it's not the same.
Right. Like you're saying, they're living on top of each other, essentially.
And that's something that we don't really, we only see that in our most populated cities, like in New York,
Right.
or San Francisco, or Seattle, or LA. And these are all cities that are having problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, Seattle's on lockdown, which to me just means quarantine.
Right. Well, this is what people in America don't understand about lockdown and the way it's being framed. It's basically just no paid leisure activities. And everybody's flipping out because this nation is so extroverted that people just can't stay inside and like be with their thoughts for a fucking day. And
So
this
I've got two thoughts about this. There's a meme going around right now where it's like, everyone's like, yeah, it's the 20s. Let's bring back the roaring 20s. And the world's like, okay, global pandemic, economic collapse, and all your bars are closed.
Right.
You know, that's just like,
I saw somebody opening up a speakeasy out of their house, which is, again, it's like,
hey, it's the roaring 20s.
Right, yeah.
And then, the other thing about the framing of lockdown and quarantine, and we haven't seen the draconian policy that China and South Korea and Singapore and
I don't even think they've gotten that draconian yet.
no, here's the I'm getting to the point though. What we've been describing, or what we've been led to believe as draconian policy, is really just a best practice reaction to a situation.
Yeah.
And so what we witnessed with these countries that mobilized, they didn't have the legislative barriers that we have. They didn't have all of the bureaucratic treadmill that people have to deal, or stair climbing machine that people have to get on to make anything happen.
Right.
And so they were able to react really quickly. But the framing of all of this stuff is really quite incredible. We don't want to call it quarantine because that we have imagery in the media from movies where a quarantine is involves people getting shot, and we're not there yet. But a quarantine,
We can't get there. It's impossible.
No.
Well, and there's a couple of reasons. I'm not going to cut you off here,
yeah.
but there's a couple of reasons why it's impossible.
Yeah, and I actually want to get into that too in a second. But it's the same thing with the limiting by the market of certain goods that have been deemed essential, like cleaning supplies, toilet paper, certain foodstuffs, and then of course the overwhelming sensibility of the masses to like, hey, if you can afford to not buy the WIC product, don't touch the WIC product because some kid needs to eat too.
Yeah.
And so people are being really cool about that. The last time I was at the store, there were still WIC products available, and I was looking for frozen juice because I like frozen concentrated juice blending. I think that's a really that's a quite a brilliant privilege that we have, is to be able to mix juices and fine tune the water to concentrate ratio to get that perfect flavor blend. That's not something that I take for granted. So
I mean, but it's also a good way to balance your nutrition.
Yeah.
In the sense of being able to have frozen and preserved fruits that are a source of vitamins and nutrients that aren't like candy.
what you were saying about how it's not very likely that we're going to get to the point where quarantine means people getting shot.
Well, we can't get there for a couple of reasons. First off, there's 450,100 National Guard total. Only, not in this state.
No, that's the entire
total
country.
in the entire country. Second, National Guard is being called up to help in hospitals because our medical industry is short-staffed.
So I want to just lay this down. Our National Guard is basically our standing highly mobilized, highly trained group of people that can work as a unit. And part of this, the importance of this kind of tasked organization is that they are not comprised of volunteers who haven't gone through extensive training to manage a situation of any kind. So they are our best first responders.
Yep.
They're not.
They're first responders for every situation.
Yeah, they're the people that get sent in to build new military bases in locations, and then they get sent home. And it's not because they're not trained for combat. It's because they're trained to do all of the facilities type mobilization.
Yep.
And physical
right.
mobilization. So
in this context, what they're doing is effectively shoring up all of the holes in our system that are there because we haven't had enough investment by our government in these systems. Third, if we actually start bringing our military home to enact martial law in the way people fear, that leaves us in a situation abroad where all of the military that was placed there to keep quote unquote our enemies in check then are no longer there. So whether it's Russia, Iran, China, whoever you say is our quote unquote enemy, if we start bringing our military home, all of a sudden we have no military in place to keep those people in bounds. So we can't do it. And this is one of those things where if the military is brought home, that's basically the start of a civil war.
Yeah.
So if we have a civil war at home and then Russia, China, and Iran effectively taking over global superpower control, then America's gone. And everybody in power understands this, and that's why they can't do it. So this is where, again, if you're saying that America is an empire and a machine, of course. If you're saying that America keeps people oppressed and uses and abuses its citizens, of course. But when we're talking about what the actual product of enacting martial law in this country, where everybody just went out and bought a bunch of fucking guns
and toilet paper.
Actually, they started running out of ammo, so they're buying guns with no ammo. Beside the point, those people aren't going to allow martial law. They wouldn't even follow a fucking quarantine, and the kids are out on spring break. So these people can't keep their fucking own in check because we've sowed this idea of individualism and freedom
and exceptionalism.
In a way that says, oh, I'm a 21-year-old dumb fuck. I can go to spring break and just act like an idiot because that's my right. That's my God-given right to say, fuck you, government.
There's a video going around where this guy's like, oh, well, we've been planning this for 2 or 3 months, and we're really looking forward to it. We just didn't want to give it up. And it's like, man, I hope that they don't go home and visit their family.
Of course they are. They're gonna kill their family, and so it's because that kid was raised to think he's so exceptionally American, and God shines on him so much that he can do whatever the fuck he wants. That now the government can't keep that kid in check. So then other people are like, oh, they're gonna enact martial law because of this dumbass. No, guess what? They can't. Because people are so reactionary and jump to so many conclusions that if they actually try to keep that kid under control with martial law, all these other people are going to flip out and start shooting at the government. And that's when the actual civil war starts. And the government knows that. So they're not that stupid. Of course, they're oligarchs. Of course, they're power-hungry predators. But they're not that stupid. They're not that dumb.
Yeah, I mean,
they're just not. They would have cut the internet off our body. We wouldn't be able to broadcast this shit. If
as much as we want to pretend that our president is what is it, Lord Farquaad from Shrek, like that meme where it's like I realize I will have to sacrifice some of you. Is like or some of you will die. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. As much as we want to joke about that being the case, it's not the case.
It's really not. It's really not.
We both have read the government's response plan to coronavirus, to COVID-19, to SARS-CoV-2, whatever you want to call it.
103 pages.
It's 103 pages of fairly dense but extremely reasonable response plan and identification. So the government already has a plan for how to know when it's time to enact the next level of containment.
Yep.
They
They
have
put it
the-
out on March 13th.
Yeah, they already know how to identify when counties need to be put on travel watch or advisory or ban, travel restrictions. They're just calling it travel restrictions, but it's variable. There are degrees of restriction. There are plans in place to secure supply chain,
Yep.
to secure national. Essentially, they're nationalizing the production of certain resources.
Finally.
At some point, if it gets bad enough, they'll
They'll
do that.
nationalize toilet paper if they have to.
Yeah, they will.
Literally.
And so this is a very even and measured response. It actually looked very similar to the Obama era SARS 1 plan, which, hey, that's cool.
And Trump didn't do this. Please, people don't.
Yeah.
Please do not.
This plan was-
misunderstand us in thinking we're praising Trump at all. This is the government. This has nothing to do with
this
Trump.
plan was created, was crafted and written by teams of people who were all conducting parallel research to reach a point where they had a broad understanding of how to approach this kind of situation. And this is decades and decades of research that went into this level of planning. It was like probably the densest 103 pages I've read in the last 6 months, and I've been reading nothing but library technical literature for the last 6 months.
I'm doing dissertation research, and this is one of the densest documents I've read in the last 6 months.
Seriously, we're not trying to scare anyone. We want everyone to be very, very reassured that there's a plan in place, and they are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And
It's
the
just-
issue is, it's not, okay, whether we want to discuss whether it's a good plan, that's a whole different issue.
Yeah.
But what the problem is
there is
that
a plan, though.
people are misconstruing this plan in a way that is effectively making it look like we're preparing for Red Dawn or fucking actually attacking our own people. But what
It's
the
not that
crazy
at all,
part
though.
is that whole framing, it makes the military out to be automatons when there are family members, there are friends, there are relatives. Like, these people who everyone is like making out as if they're gonna start attacking Americans because the government just gave them some fucking order. They're not robots. They're humans too.
No,
and
no.
This is one of the problems with this
Straight
this
up,
framing too.
the people that I know that went into the military after high school, who are still in the military now, are some of the most true Americans that I've ever met. Some of them may not have a full comprehension of the Constitution in their arguments
Or history.
or their history, but when it comes to what's right and what's wrong and who to protect and what to stand up for, these are the right people.
A lot of them just went to the military because they wanted to protect the country.
Yeah.
And they're what they
And
think.
their families and
Exactly.
and their friends.
So let's not forget that those people are not robots that just get an order and they just go do it. And to prevent insubordination, that's how it is made out to appear the army is. But they're allowed to raise objections. They just have to do it in a formal manner. So it's not like you're not allowed to question authority. You just have to follow protocol. You just can't come out and be like, fuck you, Sarge, I'm not doing this. You have to be like, you have to go through the proper protocol to make sure you don't get court-martialed for raising objection, but you can totally raise objections.
One of my buddies, he grows facial hair. What most people get as referred to as the 5 o'clock shadow. He has about 20 minutes after shaving. He's one of those guys, And
Is he Arab?
No, I think he's part Mexican, and, but that's neither here nor there. But I remember that when he came back after basic training, he was telling me about how he had to fill out paperwork so he could get permission to not shave, to maintain a less shaved face or something like that, because it just kept growing in so fast.
Yeah.
And they let him do it. They didn't make him shave as much. They'll make concessions. You just gotta fill out the paperwork.
Just like Sikhs can wear their
The turban.
the turban.
Yeah.
Like they're allowed, and they can carry their traditional knives.
Mm-hmm.
The army will let them.
Yeah.
You just have to.
Those
fucking
knives
go
get
through protocol.
registered though, and they're like,
Yep.
I mean, they know exactly where those knives are at all times. But it's just like having a firearm.
Yep.
So I actually kind of think it's badass that there are dudes walking around army bases who are highly trained with knives. Really highly trained with knives from a historical, cultural perspective that's foreign to our own society, our modern society.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a really, I guess it's not as obvious with our military tradition because the United States is still exceedingly young compared to a lot of other cultures.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's really crazy how the different martial arts techniques that get used by different armies are so varied. Like, you have Sistema in Korea. Our military uses
doesn't Russia
like,
use system as well?
I think they use Sistema and combat Sambo.
Yeah, that's
I believe
right.
They use both.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that Sambo.
Yeah, Sambo is like the Russian.
That's like leg jujitsu.
And, I mean, it's a whole lot.
Well, yeah,
it's
I know.
like catch wrestling. It's
Yeah.
like leg jiu-jitsu. They have striking in it.
Yeah.
It's effectively mixed martial arts with a
It's what
very specific.
it's what Khabib I can't even say-
Nurmagomedov, yeah.
Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, he's a Sambo practitioner. And then they cross over to like judo and jiu-jitsu really well because it has throws and it has submissions.
Yeah.
So then there's
I always felt like judo was the fine art of throwing somebody onto the ground really hard.
or I think a lot of people frame it as striking arts are hitting people with your hands, grappling arts are hitting people with the earth.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's actually really good.
And that's when you slam somebody or get slammed,
Oh,
that saying really translates because it's
Seriously,
like
growing up in Bloomington, there's a judo club, and I remember I had this class. I can't remember when during the week, but every night I got out of class and there was an ambulance outside of the hyper. And I remember asking our friend Winston about it. He's like, "Oh, that's judo club." And so I asked one of my buddies who is a judo practitioner and about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
People get thrown, and sometimes
you can't. I mean, you can practice falling all you want, but sometimes shit happens.
Yeah, and
it's not intentional at all.
and so I remember later that weekend I went to hang out with some people at Bluebird, and some of the judo club was there, and I remember seeing the worst fight I've ever seen. Like I saw a guy pick up a dude and slam him to the ground and pick him up again, and then slam him back onto the ground and then throw him, and it was like, holy shit, that guy just hulked out, like completely hulked out. And
grappling gives you a whole different kind of strength, man. It's just a whole different kind because what ends up happening is when you start grappling, you realize that it's two people's wills at battle, and the bodies are just vehicles for these wills. And it's like when you're engaged in a battle of will that's directly against another person's, it becomes a fight for survival.
Yeah,
and that's when shit gets so. It gets way more intense than other sports just because it's about as close to combat to the death as you can get without actually going to the death. And again, I think that's when you have your hands on someone and they have their hands on you and you're moving each other's mass and one has influence over the other's mass and you can control another person's inertia and redirect their movement, it makes you feel super powerful in a way. And then when you're that person getting moved, it makes you feel super vulnerable in a way where you're like, holy fuck, I could get slammed and die.
Yeah.
And then that's why it's such a high stakes controlled exchange. It's
the other thing that I remember seeing was one of the guys grabbed another dude by the shirt. And they didn't actually throw each other, but the guy whose shirt was essentially used as he just choked him out with his t-shirt.
Yeah.
He didn't even have to throw him.
Lapel choke. I mean, there's no lapel and choke, but yeah, when you know how to
He grabbed him by like the collar of his.
Yeah, collars are good.
Yeah, I mean it was incredible. Like they were like well matched, and the guy couldn't throw him or grapple him right, but he choked him down. And next thing you know, the guy just like fell down.
Yeah,
it was so
blood
surreal.
chokes happen. So people, that shit when you see it on pro wrestling, they're not actually doing them, but when they do them, it like, oh, it's not that quick. No, it's that quick.
It's
when somebody is well versed in a
3 or
blood
4
choke,
seconds.
this can be faster. Like I've talked to people who
it's
are
probably,
able to
it's probably
do
like
it.
the whole thing takes 3 or 4 seconds, but like it's probably
No,
I mean
no.
from the moment they initiate to the moment the guy's on the ground,
And
like the total,
I
sum
mean,
total, the whole thing. Like that's how I proceeded because I wasn't participating.
So there's a blood choke and then there's an air choke. If you do a blood choke correctly, it can go out in like a second and a half, maybe even less.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just like one that is tight enough and in the proper place cuts off the blood flow so quickly that it's like almost instant.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you're like, it doesn't even seem possible sometimes the way that how quick these things happen. But especially like without a gi, it's a lot harder to do the chokes that quick, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when you have a gi to use
Well,
as
gi is
leverage.
tough.
Yeah, and then it like is something that makes it easier to get leverage against the skin in a way that you can't do without the gi. So that's kind of where when you have these gi versus no gi grappling contests, they're completely different.
Yeah.
But the layperson would be like, "What's the difference?" And
Well, I mean,
like, there's no difference.
if you weren't paying attention to that little thing, it would seem like jiu-jitsu and judo are very almost identical.
Right.
And when I've talked to people who are really dedicated to one or the other, you know, they even say things like, it's like, oh, they're so similar. I mean, there are minor differences in the rules, and there's some things that we just don't practice because we don't have gis to throw around, and the corollary is like we don't do that because they don't have a gi for us to throw them with.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, well, and in the evolution, jiu-jitsu and judo are effectively sisters.
Yeah.
Well, and it's almost like one is a parent of the other at one point, and then because there's Japanese jiu-jitsu and then Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which Japanese jiu-jitsu is a lot closer to actual judo, more so than Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because Brazilian jiu-jitsu evolved from judo, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't think it evolved from Japanese jiu-jitsu. I believe it was from
So
Japanese
Brazilian jiu-jitsu is like the niece or nephew of Japanese jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
in that kind of framework.
And it's like the daughter of judo, if my memory serves, because it would seem as if, based on the naming, it would be the daughter of Japanese jiu-jitsu, but I'm fairly positive it's the daughter of judo, which makes it's like more complicated.
So by name, it's related to jiu-jitsu, but by
Because
convention and practice and evolution, it's a descendant of judo.
Well, because then they're spelled different. So Japanese jiu-jitsu is like JUJUTSU,
Oh.
but then Brazilian jiu-jitsu is JIUJITSU. So they're variations on spelling that sound the same to an American, but when you read them, they're like, I'm sure the characters are almost completely different too, which is why it sounds like Brazilian jiu-jitsu should naturally be the daughter of Japanese, but it's not that simple.
Yeah. Well, that's like the complexity of Chinese with the various tones and the way the pitches move.
Yeah.
And then their orientation, and then putting it all into characters just makes it even crazier looking.
Well, and not to go too much on a tangent, but the reason we're explaining it in this manner is because martial arts have been presented in effectively a familial guild type structure where your master and your teacher are effectively your parent within the context of the art. So this is where, like, if you practice Jeet Kune Do, you call Bruce Lee like grandmaster or like grandfather of the art. So he's like Sigung versus Sifu is like master, who would be my teacher. So this is, or I don't know that. I think the actual Chinese pronunciation is like Shifu.
Yeah. I think it depends on
or which region. Yeah. So, but it's like you would never call Sigung Sifu unless you were his direct student.
Yeah.
And this is where,
I wonder if there are any. I'm sure that there are examples throughout history where the student finds where the student Sigong becomes the Sifu.
Oh yeah, well, a perfect example is it's in a different art. So, our Adjarn in our Muay Thai school taught Dan Inosanto Muay Thai. So when he's learning Filipino martial arts from Inosanto, he's probably referring to him as guru or guro because he's the teacher in that context. And then if Inosanto's training from Ajahn Chai, he's calling him Ajahn. I mean, they're not going to call him Sifu, but it's the same thing, basically.
Yeah.
Just different lingual contexts. But they're going to respect each other's mastery within their art and respect the student position and not try to usurp them within their art. That's how the highest level of martial artists tend to. It's a pretty consistent culture where you're not having people like, if I'm a jiu-jitsu teacher and I go into a Muay Thai class, I'm not going to try to teach the Muay Thai class or vice versa. That's just how generally people are.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody who's like a Muay Thai teacher going into another Muay Thai teacher's class, then that's where the shit gets confrontational. And you might actually get a fucking challenge or some shit where, like, that shit still happens, man. Like, people go into schools and challenge, and it's really crazy that, you know, martial arts has evolved so quickly, but the understanding of it is still kind of lagging behind just because
there's a Jesse Eisenberg movie that I watched recently called The Art of Self-Defense. And it starts out as about some middle-aged desk jockey who gets beat up and decides to, learn to defend himself. But halfway through the movie, it stops feeling like it stops feeling like a story that is set in modern times and starts to feel like I'm watching some kind of weird samurai movie. Mm-hmm. And by the end of it, even though there are cars and, light fixtures and the place is their dojo, their school is just an old crematorium. Like, by the end of it, I feel like I'm watching like a legit samurai or a kung fu movie, like a very serious, somber toned. You've disgraced this, our grandmaster's school. I challenge you to a battle to the death. Like stuff like that, and it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think
I highly recommend this for those of you who need something to watch on. I think it's on Hulu right now. It was very fun if you've skipped
what's
over.
What's the name
again? The Art of Self-Defense.
Yeah, Jesse Eisenberg is a really versatile actor. I think he doesn't get, like, his Lex Luthor was different. But I don't think people were ready for it.
His Lex Luthor challenges everything that we expect from Lex, because every image we've seen of Lex is that
super composed.
He's composed. He's a very physically fit and strong. And Jesse Eisenberg's version of him
had daddy issues.
Yeah,
and was kind of vulnerable.
Yeah, and there were. I don't think that I didn't get the impression that his Lex. Actually, you know what? I think his Lex is more likely to build the suit. Mm-hmm. I think his Lex is going to build a better suit than any version of Lex that we've ever seen, because of the way that what he brings to that character.
Well, but this is where I think John Cryer to me has done the best one so far. Yeah. I put John Cryer, fucking Jesse Eisenberg, then Gene Hackman. Because Gene Hackman's now is just kind of like...
We're not even going to mention you, number 4.
Yeah, it's just kind of shit now. Like, it used to be funny, but now that we've seen so much more in the cartoons and in the Eisenberg and John Cryer one, the reason the John Cryer one to me is the best is because they wrote him to be a genius in a way where you believe the character is as smart as the actor is portraying him to be, but also as what's the word? Insecure about being in the face of a god and being driven to make sure that he has that equal power. It's this whole, like, the dynamic was there the whole time.
Yeah.
But I think the John Cryer iteration has been the best at communicating these aspects of the character.
I think we've been given more time with him.
Yeah.
That's
for sure.
That's really that's
definitely
the
part
thing.
of it.
They've been able to develop him more. But I fully expect the Eisenberg Luthor to have developed a suit that's like more than the Iron Man suit could be.
Right.
Like I don't think Tony could develop the Luthor suit.
No.
I think it's
no.
like I think Tony's.
I don't
cool
think
and all,
Tony had the motivation.
No.
Well, no, I take that back because that's what Ultron was.
Yeah.
In the sense of Ultron was the check for the other Avengers, and that got out of his control, and that's why he stopped doing that type of shit. So, at least in the movies, because in the comics, his nano suit it basically made him a god. So
yeah, the Technovore. They made an anime version of that storyline, the Technovore story, and it was it
pretty good.
It was Obadiah's son, right, or something like that. Was the antagonist?
Oh, it's been a minute.
I think I can't remember that story very well. I just remember that the nanite suit was actually very cool.
Yeah, but it's just overpowered, and that's kind of weird. You see this shit happen in the comic books where they overpower the guys, and it just kills the story. There's not, once you get too powerful, there's no real story.
Well,
except
no, I think that I'm gonna say that the Rune King Hulk storyline is the only one that I give a pass, because once he attains that power level, he realizes he can see the continuum, and then he knows that he has to, wipe out existence, go to sleep, and that when he wakes up, he can start over again, because that's the moment that he realizes the power of the Odin Force in its.
I mean, but then
whatever.
that becomes like a useless. Like if it just starts over again, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but he gets to start a new story.
But it's like a wasted story then. It's like
no, I mean but that's how it ends.
But that's what
they don't have to. They don't have to nerf him afterwards because the story is a new story. It doesn't have to start over where it started before.
What I'm saying is, when you get to a certain point and the character becomes so powerful that anything that they do, then they can just wipe it all out. It literally makes that. It's so overpowered that it's like a useless trope, because then anything they do,
it's just the end of the story.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's why. That's the only context that it can happen. That's what I mean.
Time,
because once they get there is no story after they're super powered or
yeah,
they're ultimate powered. And but with
every story gets there.
But with Rune King Hulk, when he gets there, he realizes, hey, I've got to. This is the end. And it's like this level of self-awareness that only Deadpool gets to have.
I think that again, that's where it's like I think that's a good way to acknowledge that story has no further path.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's like 100%.
That's why
enforcing what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I know, that's what I mean. But that's to me, that's the only time that storyline or path makes sense, because otherwise, they get to the end. It's like, oh, well, let's go get pizza and gyros.
Yeah.
Who the fuck cares about gyros and pizza now that you've got the power of infinite time and power and shit?
Well, I mean, I think this is the same. It's like the same shit with Watchmen as to why it was meant to be a self-contained story, and then when you try
it's supposed to end.
Yeah, because then when you try to bring Dr. Manhattan into the fucking DC universe, it just doesn't work.
Well, it fucked everything up.
Yeah, and again, this is like when you have a god that tries to walk among men and pretend to be a man as a story. It just ends with him being a god and not being a man. And that's like, it sounds like I'm oversimplifying it, but there's literally nowhere to go with that story.
Yeah, I mean, all the Cthulhu mythology created the whole like gods among men destroying existence section of the story spectrum for this level of power. And even when Marvel creates characters that have seemingly endless power, these characters are kind of imbued with this eternal maturity where they know, like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything about this, because if I move my arm too much, I'm going to wipe out, like, this thing that I've been working on for 16 billion years, and I really want to make sure that I finish it this time.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and this is kind of where Lucifer by Neil Gaiman was a really good well, I guess he didn't write did he write I don't remember if he wrote the books. Anyway, whoever wrote the Lucifer novels, because I think he created the character and then somebody else
Yeah.
took the story. If I'm missing.
I think that's kind of how a lot of those like graphic novel story universes end up happening, is that
somebody else creates
starts a like a novel or novella, and then some fan base from the fan base emerges some really talented group of artists who are like, let's turn this into a long-term thing.
Yeah. Right, because Neil Gaiman had created Sandman, and then Lucifer was a character in there, and then it got spun off. But regardless, in the Lucifer story, they made God effectively have a point where he's like, yeah, it's fucking Sandman. God's like stepped out of the picture, and he's like, this is your shit now. It's like,
yeah, this is written by Neil Gaiman. It's illustrated by Mark Epple, Richard Case. I can't even read. Drake, Teddy Christensen, Glenn Ditton, Charles Vess, Dean Ormston, and Kevin Nolan. That's a team. This isn't like just a couple of guys, two dudes in a garage. This is a whole team.
yeah. And then I guess Mike Carey is the person who wrote Lucifer, the series. Because then that's what the TV show is based off. Because the whole reason I got into that series was I started watching the TV show first, and then a friend was like, "Oh, you like the show? Fucking read the comics, because the comics are way better," which they usually are. But it's like a whole different story almost, in that a lot of the stuff that's in the comics gets left out for various reasons. But
Well, there are always challenges in translating
yeah,
any
for
kind
sure.
of written or illustrated medium. Comics make it easier to go to a video or film medium because it's storyboards.
Yeah.
But there's some things, like really mind-bendy things that you only can kind of like piece together through framing or these storyboards, and that may not be interpreted like the same way and then visually communicated.
Yeah.
Sometimes our mind is way more capable at delivering the crazy visuals and special effects than a computer. I mean, I think that's actually most of the time our brain is capable of doing that better than a computer.
Yeah, because we can imagine shit that the computer can't do, and then on top of that,
We
it's
also
like,
experience reality, and computers have only given us a virtual reality, and it's not even close yet. It's really entertaining, but it's not.
No.
It's not quite there. And I think that it's really just because the physical hardware itself is still, it hasn't miniaturized down to the point yet where it's invisible. Like, we can get the earbuds to be wireless and as small as, an earplug now, but we haven't managed to get the glasses to function at the weight of a pair of lightweight sunglasses.
I mean, I'm fairly positive that there's now AR contact lenses. I'm not.
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that.
Which again, it's like we just don't have access because it's military shit.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you can't just go out and buy.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing.
Which again, that's why to me, I'm saying if we have access to the shit that's not invisible, I'm sure there's shit that's
being still be developed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember reading that. Let's see, was it NASA was working on special contacts, like where they do a laser scan of your retina so that they can create a perfect lens. Mm-hmm. And so that everything is corrected in the lens, so that by the time it hits the retina, everything is
perfect.
It's just they can extrude these lenses at varying depths with such precision now. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then that technology was born out of glasses that were designed around a similar principle, where they used tiny little rods, I think, little like hexagon-shaped rods, and they created a matrix of glass, kind of like a bee, but because they were all so small, it would correct vision completely.
Yeah, there's like a lot of crazy shit.
So I guess my point with all that was that it takes a while for technology to miniaturize down, and so at one point what was just a crude piece of glass that had been polished into a shape that kind of focused light. Now there is and there was an intermediate step where they used an array of pieces of glass to create a perfect focused matrix of light. And now they've got something that fits directly on the surface of the eyeball, on the sclera, and it corrects all sorts of, ocular distortion, and just keeps getting smaller. And that's the thing that's holding back in my opinion, that's the thing that really holds back widespread adoption of virtual reality, is that we can't just have a pair of glasses that weigh as much as the glasses that we're used to.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even know if that's it so much as like virtual reality is still reality in that
Oh yeah, the dissociation effect of where you see and hear yourself versus where your body is.
I mean that too, but in the sense of like if you're playing a game where you have to shoot a gun, you still have to raise your arm and point the controller. So somebody who's not used to actually using their physical motor skills frequently isn't going to be good in virtual reality just because it's not physical reality. And that's kind of where I think one of the biggest hurdles to a virtual reality adoption is just going to be that a lot of people are just not coordinated in physical reality, and then they're going to try to go into virtual reality and they're going to be even less coordinated, and it's going to immediately make them not want to do it, whether it's like an invisible headset or not. And I think that's kind of where, if people looked at virtual reality as a means to get better at interacting in physical reality, then I don't think it would feel as much as like, oh, I'm going into virtual reality and failing, but instead I'm using virtual reality as a way to get more coordinated, and then maybe I'll drop my cup less, or bump into people less frequently, or shit like that. But it's like people have been saying for years that video games make people's reaction times faster, but the people who don't play video games don't really understand what that means. And that's kind of where, when we're talking about using virtual reality to train to be better in physical reality, people go, how the fuck it's like, not just talking about shooting people, like it's not about that. It's more so
I remember there was some big stink in automotive racing because a bunch of guys who were all like part of some Gran Turismo racing league online, like the champions of online Gran Turismo racing, decided to have a crack at real car racing, and lo and behold, they were amazing drivers. Like their first time out on the track, they're just like, it's like, what? Really?
Yeah, because they'd gone through the simulation
because
so
they
many
spent
times.
more hours in a simulator than any of these drivers had actually spent in a real car.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same shit with flying a plane, too, because it's like, do you think fucking airline pilots go out and learn on a real plane the first time? Like...
Sir, is your first time flying. We're going to put you behind the stick of a 747.
Right.
This is your captain speaking. This is my first time flying.
Dude, those simulators are so realistic. Yeah, it's fucking insane.
They're sitting on gimbal pads. Like, there's a way that I think you can actually crash them. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, they'll, like, go nose down and start shaking, and then they stop moving.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, it's a fucking real simulator. And that's kind of where, because those things were only accessible to shit like airline pilots before, now we're talking to, say somebody who...
I've spent maybe 80 hours flying in a Xbox 360 flight combat simulator game thing. I still fly into the ground every so often, like, because I'm chasing something.
Because it's not enough hours, clearly.
No, clearly
and
it's
that's
not.
Where, again, it's like...
I have no business, like, flying a drone that has weapons on it.
Yeah.
And I know this because when I fly a simulation of a, in a fictionalized war environment, combat environment, there are a few times that I still end up hitting the ground or I get shot.
Well, and that's just like when you find out when you buy a real drone they put limitations on you, and so you put in enough hours because then they're like, yeah, you're gonna fucking crash your shit if you don't, we're not gonna let you go above 1,500 feet until you put in 15 hours, and then once you put in 15 hours, they're gonna let you go above 3,000 feet, and then we'll see after you do 100 hours.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Because you're probably going to lose your drone.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna fly it 3 miles away, and then you're not gonna realize where the fuck it is, and it's gonna be gone forever, and you're out $500. So we're protecting you from that, and that's
This is actually a very common story. There's actually, I can't remember where it was. I think it's like somewhere like in Geist or something like that. They've got big lakes up there. Mm-hmm. But I remember reading about some people like going fishing and pulling multiple drones out of the water. Because people are out there flying them, getting video of someone like wakeboarding or just.
And the shit runs out of batteries at the wrong time.
They fall into the water like, where'd it go? I don't know. It's in the lake somewhere.
Yeah.
So, people, there are expensive-ass drones in the middle of lakes. We're not encouraging you to go looking for them.
Oh, no, they're fucked. They're fucked.
That's like a fool's errand.
Yeah, they're fucked. Once the water hits the drone with the battery inside, it's fucked because the battery's going to swell and basically... I mean, it's not going to fry it. It's going to make it unusable.
You could refurbish the body if it wasn't damaged.
Yeah.
But that'd be we're talking about replacing motors, structures, and controllers and circuitry.
That was such a waste of time.
So at that point, you're almost buying a brand new one that hasn't landed on water and hasn't spent time underwater. It's not a treasure hunt, is what we're getting at.
Yeah. Well,
but you might be lucky enough to find one while fishing randomly. So it's...
Yeah, I don't know if that's even lucky then.
That's not really found treasure, though. It's like more like crap,
if you're
what am I
looking
going to
for
do
a
with
fish
this?
and you find a shitty trash drone, it's like, well, I can't eat this. Throw it back.
But then you're littering, and that's
right,
that's no bueno.
Yeah, no, that's no good. No, man.
You get stuck with somebody's busted drone.
Yeah, I mean, but this gets back to maybe we shouldn't have been flying drones out on the fucking lake in the first place. Like, there's all this shit now.
Maybe drones shouldn't be so cheap that people
are
that careless with technology.
Yeah, because then it's like, well, if you could go check out a drone for free as long as you follow rules and did it a certain way, I'd rather that than be like trying to price it out of.
Yeah, like a special drone that, like, if it detects any kind of poor pilot behavior, it just goes into safety mode and flies home. Or
in the same way, like, they have Speedway here where it's like you can go faster than the speed limit at the Speedway, but it's like all recreation is paid. Well, not all. Most, like 95% of recreation is paid in a way that if there were unpaid recreation for people to just go fly drones, then you wouldn't have kids out fucking breaking shit and robbing people on the weekends in the same way. Because it's like, they don't have anything to do that they can't get by paying for it.
There are, I think there are like 3 or 4 paved racetracks in Indiana or in the general area that have open track days where you can take your car, and as long as it passes inspection, they'll let it on their track and you can drive as fast as you can. And if you wreck your shit, then you fucked up and you wrecked your shit. But if you take it seriously, you can go and drive your car as fast as you can comfortably and have a lot of fun. But it costs money. It's not like a cheap hobby. And then the same thing with like off-roading. There are several parks that are actually a lot more, I think there are more off-road parks than there are places to drive fast. But you can go into these places with your off-road vehicle and drive all over the place. Some of them have trails. Some of them are just wide open. You can just drive. If you can drive over it, you can drive over it type of place. And they're really more affordable, like $15 a head for a day or an afternoon of driving around in the sticks. But that still has a fairly high barrier to entry in that you have to have a capable vehicle to do this. And so... incidentally, we have a culture that has created a lot of entertainment that is expensive to participate in.
Yep, that poor people just have to sit around and fucking watch other people.
Yeah.
Like a small select group of people engage in. And this is kind of, okay, so there's all these things happening right now, and there's not real good advice being given to people in the sense of like, first off, people should stop paying credit card payments instantly. And the fact that credit cards aren't stopping payments should make people stop those payments even quicker, because it's like you have rent being suspended. You have like Duke Energy is like, hey, if you can't make your payment, we're not going to cut you off. So it's like when you have power companies and fucking rent being suspended in certain places, credit cards should be the first things fucking people are not paying. And the credit cards companies should have been the first people to suspend their payments.
Yeah, when the market is beginning to demonstrate how it is actually able to regulate itself by imposing limitations, and this is rationing, limitations on the number of products you can buy because they're looking out for the common good, you know, that's a sign that, hey, maybe we've been lied to.
Mm-hmm. And in the same way, okay, it's the same shit with landlords in that I've seen people defending landlords because they're like, oh, the landlord takes on the risk, and you just pay rent, and the landlord doesn't make that much money, and they're the ones that are tied to the mortgage, and if the fucking mortgage goes, they go up.
I'm gonna say that people who make that kind of argument don't own property.
Yeah, a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't, man. It's really funny how a lot of them don't, because then what you find out, like people like myself. So the one time I went and tried to get a mortgage, they tried to give me a mortgage in the ghetto on Pigeon Hill, where it's like Section 8 housing.
Can you even buy a house on there?
Yeah, you can, apparently. But that was the only option. I was making $40 an hour. You know, this was after I got my first master's degree. So it's not like I'm just some fucking high school kid trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
I had a master's degree, was employed, gainfully employed at a very, very good wage. And then they told us, like, my lady who was unemployed, or she was employed at the at IU, it wasn't unemployed. It was like way less employed, like per capita, because they pay their fucking people shit at IU. Like, she was getting shit pay because IU doesn't want to pay their people. And they told her...
Well, IU is such a large institution that they have an endless supply of candidates to fill roles with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is like any place. But they told her that she'd be better off applying with 1/4 of my income and taking me off of the mortgage application. And it's like, they straight just flat out told her that in the office. So that's where I'm like, all these people who are like, well, your fucking landlord's taking on your risk. Well, it's because they're not fucking giving black people mortgages in nice houses. They're saying, oh, you're black? You want a mortgage? Yeah, you can go fucking get a mortgage in the ghetto, in a Section 8 house. It don't matter how much you fucking make. So that's where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to buy a house in this system, but when I'm renting, I'm also paying somebody else's mortgage because I can't get a fucking mortgage on a house that's not in a high crime risk area. So it's like, and the crazy thing is, these people don't understand that in the first place. So in a time like now, they're not going to get it anymore. But they're also people who then influence how our government responds to shit. So that's kind of where, when you have people crying about their fucking Airbnb income because they were hosts and Airbnb canceled and they can't get their fucking landlord money, it's like, these people own 3 and 4 properties and they're trying to squeeze Americans who are living check to check. This is feudalism. We're fucking serfs and vassals, man.
Just simply, my take on Airbnb and people that are trying to utilize that as a primary source of income. When you are providing the infrastructure, the physical space for a hotel, but you are not the hotel, they are using you. And you, that's all there is. All parties involved, other than Airbnb, the company itself, are being used.
Yep.
Because there's no way that, I mean, I'm sure that some people have done some math and they think that they can pay for a property, and they probably can, but they're going to spend a lot more time, just physical hours making sure that these things work. I read about people who do this stuff, and they have like the regular cleaning staff that come in to check the place out after someone leaves. And it's like,
my sister's a property manager.
Yeah. And that shit. And so, like, when you have that kind of thing works when you can scale the operation up to a sufficient size. But when we're talking about like tiny, like one property with 2 or 3, that can only be viewed as like a side income.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be, that can never fully flourish into something real. You have to own houses and rent them out for real. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of a market that you're not really participating in. It's like eBay was a flea market,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, you're at the mercy of the market. And that's really what Airbnb is doing, except they're just kind of like you're loaning it for some promise of something else. And it doesn't, I know that there's some pretty incredible deals out there. I've seen some of these listings where it's like, rent someone's house in the mountains in the middle of the Smokies, or on the highest point of the Smoky Mountains, and watch the sun roll in over. And it's beautiful stuff. That's just a huge liability.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are all sorts of rules to protect people, but yeah.
Well, I mean, there's rules to protect people, but they changed them in extenuating circumstances.
Yep.
So that's kind of where now, when the rules get changed to then benefit the people, and you have these fucking landlords like flipping out, being like, we need our rent money because we got to pay our mortgages on our second and third properties, and regular people are fucking worried about getting diapers for their kids.
I'm pretty sure that a good financial plan would involve paying for properties like, one at a time, instead of trying to like do a bunch of parallel
you mean
properties.
logic?
Yeah. Having sound financial plan behind some kind of operation that exposes one to extreme fiduciary risk.
I believe it's called over leveraging.
Yeah.
I believe that's the financial term for that.
Yeah.
When you're over leveraged and then the market has a sudden dramatic shift in which the bottom falls out of your operation, and then all of your shit's in the red, and then you need socialism.
And this what's funny is that all it takes is a global pandemic for people to realize the importance of all these social safety nets and how they need to apply to everyone.
Yep.
Because it's nice that there are a bunch of people in LA who all have private jets who can fly out to Sunvale, Idaho, and in an attempt to flee the pandemic. But then it turns out that they become the most contaminated county in Idaho, and there's only one ICU unit, one bed in the county.
Yep.
And there are more people in that county that are infected than the rest of Idaho combined. Like when that kind of stuff happens.
Well, it's really insane. Like, we talked about The Circle a few weeks ago. Well, it's probably a couple months ago, or not a couple months, like a month ago now. That show is effectively a way that people could be learning how to self-isolate, because the show's premise is that people have to be in a room and can only communicate with each other through social media and not even through video chats in the first place. And these people could do it on their own for money.
Yeah.
If there was people who were willing to do it for, I think it was like 10,000. I don't even think it was, it may have been 100,000. I don't remember how much, but they were willing to do this shit for money. So if people would sit there and watch this show and realize like it's not even that bad to be in isolation, in the sense of better to be isolated than at risk and fucking dead. But there's this element of people don't know what to do because they've just never been in a spot where everything was simultaneously shut down. It's like, oh, even on Christmas, you can go watch a movie. That's what everybody does on Christmas. Go out to the fucking movie theaters or go like bowling or something. Because there's always something open. And now that the only things open are non-leisure, people are like losing their fucking shit.
You know what's funny is when typically during periods of time during holiday seasons when everything's closed, there's one thing that's always open, and it's a Chinese restaurant.
Yep.
And so throughout all of modern America, when nobody else was there, to help people, get some to eat or go out with their family, some Chinese restaurant was there, and they were open. And they were just like, "Hey,
We're happy that you're here. What would you like us to make you? We'll make you anything that we can make. And they did, and everyone loves it because everyone loves Chinese food. And then some bullshit happens, and our fucking idiot in chief decides to say Chinese virus, and then his fucking Secretary of State dingbat decides to call it the Wuhan virus. I'm Chinese, and I'm Chinese American, and so there's part of me that's like, wait a second, this isn't right. This is happening everywhere. Like, straight up, it's everywhere.
And we don't even know for sure that it originated there. We just know they took it seriously there first.
That's even more amusing. Let's name it after the people that took it seriously. You know what the Spanish flu is named after? The people who didn't take it seriously. I mean, at the same time, though, I'm highly amused by Kung Flu. I know that it's terrible, but it just tickles me for some reason. It's like everyone was Kung Flu fighting. Speaking of which, there's a lot of really interesting coronavirus music out there. I encourage everyone to search for it. Some of it out there, it tells you everything that you need to know about isolating yourself, and has like strong words of encouragement that are quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
Just go looking for it. You'll find it.
I think that shit's hilarious, and what's really crazy is like, if you came out with a rap right now about like being out at the club and blinging, nobody would even believe that shit.
Nope.
Like, you're not.
It's like, no,
you're not.
You might be in your garage like washing your Mercedes, or you might be in your bathroom like cleaning off your chain, but you're not at the club.
No, you're not.
You're not
out on the corner slinging rocks. No, you're not. You're not out riding in your whip. No, you're not.
The people who have rocks and would be riding around in their whip, they're just sitting around at home with their rocks, looking at the dash of their whip. They're just thinking, like, man, I can't go anywhere.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But at least I got this badass subwoofer I can listen to. So that's some consolation.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think it's what, from here on out, that I just wonder if people are just gonna put that glaze back on their eyes and just try to go back to business as usual, because I feel like it's gonna be impossible, because everybody's gonna be so traumatized from this shit once it's actually over. People are gonna be unpacking their trauma.
Our government has stated that they expect this to last 10 to 12 more. 10 to 18 weeks, depending on where you are and what's actually going on. They've got, like we were talking about earlier, they've got all sorts of metrics established to identify when things are actually happening. If you are able to find this document, I think it's like page 68 or 71 of 103, and it outlines basics of identifying what's actually going on, and what I gleaned from it all is that we're in phase 2, between phase 2A and 2B.
Yep. And
so we're at this kind of critical junction where containment is the name of the game, but it's not blowing up everywhere yet. But from what I was looking at on some maps, it's not slowing down. I mean, we're number 1 in kind of the worst way right now.
I don't think it's slowing down because the social distancing hadn't started yet. So
it hadn't started soon enough.
The 14-day incubation period hasn't caught up. The social distancing hasn't caught up. So all the people who got...
All the people in the 5-day...
who got infected before people started social distancing are just now showing. So in like 2 weeks, we'll start to see the actual shit start to reduce if people keep social distancing. Which is not that bad. It's not that far off.
I think his name is like Larry Brilliant or Dr. Brilliant.
Yeah.
He's the smallpox guy. He expects between 50 and 75% exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes the spectrum of like mild to severe cases.
I feel like that's even conservative, honestly.
I think that's conservative.
Well, because I read it.
One of my friends, her father-in-law, I can't remember. She said he worked or works
in DoD, but it was part of the team that developed the analytics program that tracks disease and just tracks all this kind of information. And she said something that kind of like struck me as like a damn it moment, and that he described this as our generation, and by generation I'm assuming he meant like everyone that's alive right now, not just like millennials or boomers or Gen X or any of that crap, but everyone who's alive on Earth in this moment. This is our bubonic plague. This is our Spanish influenza. This is our cholera outbreak. This is our whatever it is that comes around every so often and wipes people out. This is it. This is the one.
I mean, we were kind of overdue, really.
Well, SARS tried, and MERS tried, and all the other ones that were really bad, like they're too fast. But this one seems to have struck a balance between how quickly it kicks in, how quickly it kills people, and the amount of time that it's able to be transmitted by people who are asymptomatic.
Yeah, I think, it seems like this shit happens almost every 30 years-ish.
Well, the big ones.
The big ones. And that's kind of where we were overdue.
Yeah.
But then that's also in tandem with people who didn't take shit seriously, so then they made it worse.
Well, it's funny, like, I keep reading about, people are like, we're going to have a vaccine, or we're going to have a viral treatment, or we're going to have some kind of widespread treatment. And my understanding is that coronavirus includes, that family includes the common cold, which we can't even, all we can do is make people more comfortable.
Basically.
And my understanding is that this is the ultimate version of Superman of common colds. And its pneumonia is like the most badass version of like Darkseid's like Z beam or whatever, his psycho beam or whatever that crazy thing is that can go in two directions. And this is some crazy shit. And it bothers the hell out of me that I read, people don't take this seriously. The World Health Organization declared this a global pandemic, and then there's some idiot on the internet who can see through the media's veiled lies, who doesn't believe it. It's like
there's so much cognitive dissonance with these conspiracy theorists, because on the one hand, the fucking government created the shit, and then they're lying about creating it to then use it as a reason to create martial law. It's completely...
Man, that's some shark jumping.
It's a completely paradoxical, illogical framing.
It requires that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people keep a secret. Like a really serious secret.
Impossible.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
No.
I can believe maybe 100 people who were who were threatened with their families' lives might be able to keep quiet for a little while, but eventually they would break.
More than 2 people will keep a secret personally.
Yeah.
Even 2 people is a stretch.
I think that only one person can keep a secret, and it's only if they're afraid that if they say anything, then
it's just a lot of people don't have a platform.
Yeah,
is the difference, I think, because it's like people who have real secrets will end up saying those things to people in positions where they know they won't be believed, just so they can get it off their chest. And then it's
that's the whole concept of plausible deniability.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's all these things about the way people are told things and the way people are framed. So then it's like, if you're working on a state secret, you're not going to get the whole picture.
No, you're going to get enough.
If you're actually working on it anyway.
You're only going to work on what you're supposed to work on, and that's it.
Yeah. So there's all these things about quote unquote keeping a secret as to why.
I don't think
if someone actually knows a full secret picture, and they're
the guy who's in charge.
Who created
I think the guy who was in charge of the Manhattan Project probably had a full top-down understanding of what was going on, but I doubt that his entire team did.
Yep, exactly right.
I bet if the entire team put all of their knowledge together, they still wouldn't have a full picture.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Like his final contribution makes everything work.
And it's done for state security on it's like if you have say you're developing a spy satellite, you don't want everyone working on it to have the schematics, because then that person get kidnapped and fucking just have somebody fucking steal the schematics from them and then compromise your shit. It's
Well-
just that's like a real logical reason as to why not to tell everybody everything.
I have this really weird curiosity about Chinese products because some of them are good and some of them are crap. And the ones that are crap are usually like a knockoff, like a pre-production knockoff, like they were making a bid for it, and something was wrong, but it wasn't. It was just not good enough to meet the expectations of the person who was trying to private label it. But they'll still sell this product. And so sometimes you get these products that are like half-baked or like poorly translated, or there's something wrong with it. And it's usually like something minor. And of course that microphone I bought was absolute crap. And I fixed the suspension system with rubber bands after the fact, but that's beside the point. But there are a lot of things where you can see like, oh, they definitely stole this technology, and they just didn't have the rest of it because it's very clearly poorly implemented. And that's just the sign of a bad knockoff because, I give them credit for trying, but that's about it.
Yeah. No, but at the same time, it doesn't matter if it's a good knockoff. If you flood an economy of people who have poor decision-making skills with those poor knockoffs, and then they waste their money on poor knockoffs and end up like broken in the gutter because they couldn't they all wanted fake Chanel purses.
Yeah, well, in the audio recording world, I read in forums a lot when someone's like, "Hey, is this piece of like unreasonably cheap gear any good?" And a lot of times you'll see at least one, maybe two people say, buy cheap, pay twice.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that thing exists. It's not just because people like saying it.
That's very true.
I think that
because it's not even about the cheaper option being less quality. It's that the cheapest option is usually the least quality, almost inevitably.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be something that's like too good to be true cheap, and that's why you should never buy it because it's too good to be true. And that's I think that's where generally the mid-range prices on things in this economy are usually the best because they have to make their product the best to compete with the leading brand.
What's funny about that is that these microphones that we use are made by this company, or they're branded by a company called Newer, and they're called the NW700. I'm very happy with them, and they're like $20 for the microphone, the shock mount, the stand, like the whole thing. And I think there's like a pop filter. I don't know. I got them on eBay or Amazon. I can't remember which one. It's not really that important, but this is one of those few things that I've ever purchased that I lowballed, that I like. I mean, we've got 3 of these things. I never would have bought 3 of them if they were crap.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is possible to find things that are inexpensive, that are designed well.
Totally.
And that meet a price point without, that don't compromise the desire to make some money. Because, I mean, whoever's making these things clearly is in the business to make some money, but they also happen to turn out a product that works pretty well for our needs. So,
yeah,
it is possible, people. You can find good deals. Good deals still exist. There are quality products made in China. You just can't buy the too good to be true microphone. Just don't do it. Don't waste your time. If it says 240 on it and it's got weird red shit, it's probably crap. If it's a knockoff of a Lewitt 240 or a 420 or 440 LCT, it's just don't waste your time on the knockoff of that Lewitt microphone. But
yeah, I was looking at the meaning of Star Trek book. I think that's like,
oh, that's a physics of Star Trek exploration. It's actually really interesting because they try to reverse in physics, the physics of Star Trek. And it turns out that a lot of the things that Roddenberry built into his story universe appear that he was trying to keep it within the reins of physics. And so I think that's one of those things that when I was younger, I remember reading these fantastic sci-fi novels, like Ringworld, where they throw the laws of physics out, and they're like, well, screw that. Why would we create a rule like that? Let's just say that we've got something that can do more. let's travel faster than light. Why not? And but there's no explanation for how. Mm-hmm. It's like we just didn't make up that rule. And I find that really amusing. I like it a lot, actually. It makes a story kind of amusing because it's like, here's some alien race that can do all this stuff. But Star Trek, however, is like, no, we're bound by physical laws.
Yeah.
We can work around this. We understand physics well enough to create a story universe that's going to inspire scientists.
Well, and I think this gets back to the whole overpowered thing, because it's like, if you create a physical race that can overcome the physical limits of the universe without an explanation, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, well, that sucks.
Ironically, that series of novels has won numerous like Hugos and Nebula awards. So it's like a fairly, Ringworld is a fairly appreciated sci-fi universe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they broke a lot of weird rules.
Yeah,
especially later in the series, they got a guy who lives for thousands of years by eating some tree of life root. Yeah, I just spoiled it for you. What are you going to do about it? But that's the thing, is like, that's a machine of God moment.
Yeah.
And so on some level, that's that kind of mechanism is useful, but sometimes it's a really easy to abuse mechanism in storytelling.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where it's been so overdone that's where the physics, even if the physics aren't based in our world, if there's some sort of physics binding the universe in which it's described. So even like Jedi, for example, there's a limit on the Jedi's power and shit like that. Whereas like, if it were, I think we discussed, they explored the unlimited Jedi power in the books, and it goes into a completely wasted place, or uninteresting place. Because I think that's where, because we're humans, God characters we can't relate to unless you have a God complex, which is in your fucking narcissistic fucking sociopath, most likely.
I think that so Marvel has Ego, the planet, which has near godlike omniscience.
Yeah.
And then in DC, their planet character is a Green Lantern. That's how vastly different those story universes turned out. One has this like this evil, malicious actor planet that wants to develop around the rest of the universe, and then the other is a Green Lantern, the most powerful lantern.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and in that, there is a level of storytelling in the Marvel universe that feels slightly more juvenile, whereas the DC universe feels like there are a lot more overarching, complex, adult, philosophically oriented stories. But I think that's not necessarily true anymore, in that Marvel has such a wide array of writers now.
Yeah. Well, Marvel has access to Disney.
Did you see they had these non-binary characters called Snowflake and fucking... Oh, God, what was the other one? It was like...
What show are you talking about?
It's not a show.
Oh, Marvel's created some new characters?
Yeah, it was a clusterfuck.
Snowflake. And Safe Space.
Yeah, Snowflake and Safe Space. So these were two non-binary people of color that were created by a cishet white dude. And like, yeah, people were not.
Are they okay? So I'm looking at these. These.
This is real. This is not an Onion article.
That I feel like I'm looking at people who are getting ready to play some combination of handball or racquetball or volleyball, maybe, and they're participating in like Ninja Warrior.
Or Running Man 2020.
Yeah, there's definitely a Running Man vibe to this. Maybe Hunger Games, even like the cartoon version of the Hunger Games, if that ever gets released.
Yeah.
Because that would have to be some stupid series, and it would be more about the games and competing and weird interpersonal conflict than it would be about any kind of like nuanced political discussion or ethics discussion.
But Snowflake and Safe Space were what Marvel thought the world needed right now concerning what a cishet white dude thinks of when they think of a non-binary person of color as a potential superhero. Because then...
When I think of a non-binary person of color, let's see, what does that even mean? For a second, I thought about Grace Jones. But
she wasn't non-binary.
And I know she's not.
Yeah.
She's beautiful and she's very effeminate.
Yeah, we don't get too many non-binary people.
I don't know why I thought. No, but that's the thing. Is like I don't even know why I even thought of Grace Jones. Like because she's like has strong features, but she's still really effeminate.
I mean, but then non-binary. Okay.
This is
you can't
complex.
define non-binary by gender.
I know that's what I mean.
And still have it be non-binary.
I know that's what I'm getting at.
Which,
is like
that's
I'm
kind of where
I'm trying to imagine. Like it's like what do I even think
I
of?
think that
and
is
I
a failed exercise.
Yeah, it is.
Because then if you're trying to construct what a non-binary person should look like, then you're just going to impose a gender norm.
Yeah.
On people that are trying to get away from gender norms.
I think that they would wear like clothes. and they might comb or brush their hair or maybe
brush their teeth.
They might wear sunglasses.
Maybe hats.
They may wear shoes
jewelry
or sandals.
Yeah, I don't know.
Jewelry, maybe no jewelry. I bet they eat food.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like the most basic, like nondescript person right now.
Because then you see,
I mean, what kind of? Yeah.
There's like some women's group that was like actively trying to say non-binary women, and then non-binary people were trying to call them out on that language, and they're like, we know exactly what language we're using, because they want, there's this establishment in America that wants to have a heteronormative culture, and then they also some of them exist on. Some of them identify as left wing. I don't say they exist on the left wing. They identify as if they're Democrats and on the left wing, but in reality, they have all these beliefs that are just reinforcing white supremacist patriarchy that then is also trying to increase the white population.
What's really amusing about all of this is the whole time the DNC has been running this campaign against Bernie Sanders' platform, they're just like, no, we can't do any of these things. And then as soon as we have a global pandemic, the Republican wing of the legislative branch is like, hey, we're on board with these things.
Yeah.
So it was like a really weird bizarro world moment for me.
Yeah,
because
it's real crazy.
It's like, wait a second, did they just agree with Bernie?
Yeah.
Did the Republicans did that really just happen?
So there's some troubling shit about the way the language is being used too, because it's happening on both sides. Like both the Republicans and Democrats are repeatedly referring to American workers in the workforce, but they're not talking about the American people. And this is concerning to me because one of the proposals that was put forth was that the aid would come in the form of tax breaks, which that's fucking stupid.
That only benefits the people at the top.
Exactly.
And corporations, because
people that already have money. If you already have money, if you're living check to check, a tax break ain't fucking shit right now.
Yeah, it's like what, $16.
And guess who proposed that one? Fucking Nancy Pelosi. Nancy fucking Pelosi. So when we have people like Nancy, because then we have like Ilhan Omar putting forth like send Americans a check right now and then cover undocumented immigrants too. And then you have these fucking idiots who are like, well, you should pay undocumented immigrants because they're the ones working right now, you fucking morons. All these jobs, like a lot of the warehouses
that have been deemed essential
are undocumented immigrants in a lot of these warehouses.
It's funny
a lot of these warehouses,
in the pro pot states like California and Washington, or whatever. They're all like enacting. They're enacting shutdown policies, or things are being shut down. Bars are being closed. Restaurants are being closed. Travel's being restricted. But pot shops are being allowed to operate because they've deemed that even recreationally, this thing is necessary.
Yet they're, still trying to lock people up in other states, which is fucked.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where, again, like right now, we should be looking at everything and being like, is this important? Is this important? Let's not do this. Let's not do that because that's not important anymore. And just because the pandemic is over, we should not stop doing those things from that point forward, because
we
then
can't
it's
go
like,
back. If we go back, then we're just asking for this shit to happen again.
Exactly. And that's kind of where,
and it might not be another pandemic, but it's going to be economic issues of some sort.
It'll be something.
And it will be extensive economic damage.
Now, and it's crazy because if every American had been receiving $1,000 check or whatever a month, and it was enough to cover their rent, and it was enough to cover their bills, we wouldn't have to fucking suspend rent. And if they got another check next month, guess what? They wouldn't have to suspend rent next month either. And it's like, how is it that hard to put these math concepts together? Because right now, what's happening is going to the banks, and then it goes to the businesses, and then it goes to the worker, and then it goes to the landlord, and then it goes to the tax man at every single point. So then all of these things as a cascade could have been alleviated if the money would have just went to the fucking worker or hey, you got me doing it, the fucking person in the first place. If people in America would just have a safety net that was there regardless of if there was a pandemic or not. Then once the pandemic hit, the safety net's there.
Our nation's health and wellness safety nets for our children have collapsed. So many kids rely on schools for their 2 meals a day, and our healthcare system has failed because bottom line mentality. It's like our public library closed. That's a place where people would go to, do research or get information or to meet people, to organize. And there's actually, there's still some community action going on where I think there's some people are trying to organize community operations for food production. And I remember seeing a post on Facebook that said, hey, we're going to meet on the back parking lot, of the library. And so it's like, oh, cool. So at least the facility is still being used to organize people, because some people they can't stay locked up in their house and safe. They want to go outside and tempt fate with
freedom.
something.
That's my freedom to go outside during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And, there's this element of, we were talking about this. I went and looked. We were talking about this on January 12th. Because there was no official name for it. We were talking about bat flu, and I went back and listened to the episode. The discussion was that it was potentially coming from either pigs, because the pig production had been deregulated, or it was from bats. They didn't even fucking know at the time if it was from America or from China. So all these people who are saying China didn't tell us, we have proof ourselves that we knew about it.
Yeah,
in
we were
fucking
talking
January.
about it back then.
January 12th. And it's like, if we were talking about it on January 12th, then we had probably heard about it during the week.
I think, a lot of things that we talk about are usually about a week or two, within a week or two of having happened. Mostly because it's just the nature of dialogue, and we're trying to stay, kind of current with events, because that's part of the nature of this dialogue, is that it's about what's happening around us. But, we're just two guys in Indiana who are tuned into the internet, and we all have access to this information, and so it's out there. It's not like someone just made it up we didn't just start talking about bat flu. Although I'm pretty sure it was because we were joking about the kind of what happens to Batman when he gets sick at some point.
That joke came after.
Okay, it came after that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
At least that joke was part of it. But
That joke came of the concept of we were discussing bat flu in the first place. Like, why would we even just start? We wouldn't just start talking about Batman having bat flu when the coronavirus was happening to be starting. That's not like we're not that prophetic. Like, I give us props, but come on, we're not that good. We're not that good because that would be better than Nostradamus level shit. Like,
yeah. Well, yeah.
Fucking yeah. I think
that it's reasonable that what all the well, not all the epidemiologists that have published, their information, there seems to be this sense that this thing has jumped from bat or from pangolin. It has consistencies with a bat coronavirus and a pangolin coronavirus, and that at some point humans got exposed to this, but it was only going from bat and pangolin to human.
yeah.
And so it wasn't until, within the last couple months, 3 months, maybe 4 months, that it jumped species where it became human to human transmissible.
And this is why what you're discussing right now is the very reason as to why people are flipping out about it more than the flu, because the issue is that when you're talking about those jumps, you're actually talking about mutations.
Yeah.
And if something mutates that fast, that makes it much more difficult to actually get a vaccine
Yeah.
or a cure.
Yeah.
Because people are conflating vaccine and cure. Those are not the same thing.
There might be some bacteriophage that lives in bats and pangolin that allow them to carry this thing around with them, and just like it's the common cold for them.
Right.
And but whatever it is, that phage doesn't exist in humans.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist for us.
And then the issue is that if it mutates before they get a chance to get control over it now, then
the next iteration
will be worse. Okay, it's gonna be worse.
Well, so-
but then this is why when they're reporting no new cases in China, that's like people are very skeptical of it.
Well,
and I don't necessarily blame them for being skeptical.
They say no new domestic cases, that it's people who are returning.
Right. But that's completely in line with when they started locking down.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where, again, it completely makes sense, as if that, like, if we had started locking down when they did, we would be seeing no new cases either.
Yeah.
And the incubation period is why people aren't. It's like
That's the crazy
Americans
shit.
don't understand the future.
It can incubate within a day, or up to 5 days, or 15 days, or as far as 20 days. It seems like
I think this whole thing is proof that Americans have no concept of how to look at the past and apply that to planning a future. Because the only thing that they're good at planning futures for is vacations, apparently. Because that's the only shit that seems to be impacted, is like all these people had their vacations planned out.
yeah, but they've
and all
only
their
been planning for
vacation-
2 to 3 months.
Right, but that's the only thing that they planned, is what I'm saying. They haven't planned about their fucking existence beyond these vacations. And that's fine if we've got everything solved, but we've been saying this for months now. If we have poor children in society, adults shouldn't be taking vacations.
Yeah.
It's a level of cognitive dissonance where it's like now everybody's forced to sit at home and think about how we got here. And you got these people who are like, oh, is it the apocalypse? Is this the end of days?
Well, I'm going to go on vacation.
My God. Exactly. We have the
It's a pretty interesting spectrum from
you never
completely
get-
from chicken the sky's falling all the way
to vacation.
to vacations.
It's really it's funny when you put it in that perspective. It's like we just can't get a rational medium ever in America. There's just never a time where we react to something like rationally in a way that people sometimes look at our numbers and ask why we do this, and we're not like a huge Joe Rogan whatever podcast. And I'm like, I don't want people right now to fucking get us, because these people don't necessarily understand anything. Like, I want people who are very advanced mentally, in a place where they get history and they get why shit is wrong right now. That's the audience. Like, if people get this in 65 years and I'm long gone, that'll be awesome to me, because that's more so like the people who I think are advanced mentally are the ones I want to resonate with. I don't want to just resonate with an audience for the sake of getting an audience. It's like the reward and payoff of doing a creative endeavor is like, you can do it for the clout, or you can do it because you're driven to do it. And I think in that most people in America are trained to believe that everything is about selling and getting recognized through sales in such a way that they can't even comprehend the idea of, like, we've been doing this shit for almost 2 years now. Like, you've put a significant amount of money into this at this point. Like, the idea of putting time and money into something without seeing an immediate return is so foreign to Americans that they just, like, it's completely irrational to a lot of people, in a way where I'm like, I feel bad for them, because that means that they can't do anything for the sake of doing it. It's like, if you've never been so compelled to do something, but because you're not getting paid to do it, like, that's a mental restriction that I feel like, holy shit, that not being able to, like, act on your own desires is like a mental prison that people don't even understand is a prison.
You know, the funny thing about it is, like, I don't even feel like I've put money into it. I don't feel like I've spent. I know that I know that I've put a lot of resources into hardware and time and learning how to use it, but I feel like these are all the things that you actually have to do these things.
You're investing in yourself.
Yeah, well, like,
and yourself is growing when you invest in yourself, so it doesn't ever feel like a loss.
Yeah.
It never feels like a loss.
No, I feel like the most rewarding part of this whole process, though, is just being able to keep a record of how my perspective on the world changes, and how the ideas that I have change over time, and how it's actually kind of fun.
And the ones that stay the same.
Well, yeah, that too. But it's really kind of fun to keep a record of the way that we see things. And the benefit to this is that we can appreciate our own growth. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it's. I mean, I think that people can appreciate personal growth in different ways. But we're in a very unique position technologically, that we're able to create records of ideas at the speed of thought, and share them with people at the speed of light. And, you know, once again, our good friend Winston, I remember he and I were talking one day, and he described using video chat as a quantum communications portal. Because here we are staring at pieces of glass and plastic and excited electrons, and we're looking at each other through space and time. It's a portal.
Yeah.
And we take that for granted, that we've as long as we're within relative proximity, and by relative proximity I mean somewhere on a planet, and that's a pretty big amount of space to cover, there is such a narrow delay that you're almost communicating in real time, even when you're talking to somebody on the other side of the planet. I've talked to people in India before, you know. It's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. It's not as bad as the communications gap between the Earth and Mars, or even the Earth and the Moon even. But that's the thing, is we have essentially defeated the localized quantum communication barrier. Mm-hmm. And when we phrase it like that, it becomes this really fantastic. It's like, holy shit, that's like magic. That's quantum science.
It would be magic.
It would be if you had no idea what we were doing. Like, if I were to start rattling off the protocols that I had to learn about to make this thing work, this whole system work, after a while it starts sounding like I'm describing a network architecture, or, you know, something else that involves weird acronyms, and because it's all based on computers.
It's a local area network.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
And we're running
all
audio
it is.
over a network. We're real time encoding audio streams to be easily
Well,
transmissible over internet, over lower bandwidth.
The internet grew so fast. I feel like people forget what the internet actually is, and that it's just computers connected to other computers. In that, I don't know if you ever did LAN parties when you were a kid.
Oh yeah.
But like when when people would get together and either bring their computers together or go to internet cafes and have online games where it was like 6-on-6 or like 12-on-12 or there's all these different
Yeah,
variations.
like Team Fortress Knights.
There were a lot of times where those were in they were like their own isolated networks, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like the internet has evolved in such a way that the people who were using the early internet were much more directly connected than we are now, because we have a lot of internet service providers that are becoming the middleman, so to speak, in our communications, and that's why the NSA is able to tap them. But that's kind of where, again, it's like we've come far and then gone back and then come far and then gone back. Everything ebbs and flows.
I think at this point, people should be thankful that the government is accessing our fucking mobile devices and tracking our location so that they can get a better idea of the heat, how accurate the heat maps are.
Right.
And they can get an idea of who needs to be tracked and for what reasons.
But they don't, and that's
don't.
like that's one of the things where I think
I'm sure they're tracking some people, but not everyone.
Right, yeah.
they're definitely people of interest.
So like I read an account of someone who was in Italy before the shit started getting bad there, and they were there for a graduate program, and then they figured they were positive, and when they came back all the way through the border, nobody asked them where they had been. There was no questions. Like, they weren't trying to figure out who was coming from anywhere. So then this person goes and gets tested, and they test positive. So then they're like, well, I pretty much exposed everybody in the fucking airport that I was, anywhere near.
Did I say some like 316,000 at the beginning of the show?
Yeah, I think so.
Because we're at 328,000 now.
Yeah.
That's just an idea of how fast this thing is happening.
Well, now it's starting to spread to Africa too, and like, I have a lot of connections on Facebook that are in Africa.
The United States has 32,000 cases now.
Because I've been there a few times, and then like people are reacting now like we were reacting a couple of weeks ago, and that's kind of where I'm like, I'm breaking my complete boycott to communicate to people like, hey, you guys should take this shit seriously, because that's what you're doing now is exactly what we were doing fucking 2 weeks ago, and now we're paying for it. And that's the shit Italy was saying to us 2 weeks ago. And that's like...
Yesterday, there were 24,000 cases in the United States. Today, there are 32,000 cases in the United States. That's 8,000 in a day. That's like...
But somehow I feel like it's slowing down. To be honest, like, because the reporting is behind, so the reporting is going to keep going up. But I feel like not, since we're just now...
Our total cases per 1 million... hey, they went down.
Huh.
That's good.
Nice.
From 98 yesterday. I felt it. 73 yesterday. They went up to 98 today. So they're going up.
Yeah.
I was pressing the wrong button.
Yeah, but regardless, I think the reporting is lagging behind on purpose. So, in the way that we've started social distancing.
Well, the Indiana travel restrictions map keeps getting more orange, and the Indiana map itself for total positive cases is at 201, 6 total deaths with almost 1,500 cases tested, and the heat map is pretty much localized around Marion County. It's what is it? Yeah, so Marion, Hamilton, and Johnson County are on the heat map as having the most cases.
looks like. Yeah, Marion County has 82 cases.
Yeah, well,
That's also that whole north-south corridor of Indianapolis, Greenwood, and Noblesville. That's like super high traffic, anyways.
yeah.
And so that's a dense population region of the state. It's all along 65. Man, that's like those. So those are the big conditions. It's in this country. You know, population density, proximity to an interstate.
Gas pump handles.
Gas
they said
pumps.
gas pump handles were like 71% of where the transmission was taking place.
Yeah, the last time I filled up with gas, I was like holding on to the gas towel between my hand and the things. I didn't have any gloves. And it's like, oh, fuck. And get in the car. And it's like, I don't want to touch anything with this hand.
Yeah, no, I totally used paper towel or some shit. And it was like,
Yeah. I recently purchased a box of gloves on off of the internet. It weighs 13 pounds. I expect it sometime within a month.
no, man. And fuck these senators that sold off stock.
You know, that's some Irie bullshit right there.
Yeah,
like,
they shouldn't be. Senators shouldn't be allowed to own stock without making it known what stock they hold, because people who have special interests shouldn't be allowed to make fucking legislative decisions about anything without letting people know what those special
I
interests are.
feel like that is a variation of the annulments clause that they tried to enforce with the president, but were unable to enforce.
Yeah, again, it's like, you know, we shouldn't have any public officials who own stock, especially during times like this. I mean, it's like they can own it and make it public or not own it at all, because that's, you know, it's clearly made a situation where the people taking advantage of the timing of finding out information to then sell off their stock before the fucking market crashed is then, you know, that's a level of supervillain despicable that A, it's illegal for multiple reasons, and then B, that people are all stockpiling guns and worried about fucking martial law, but they're not gonna go after these fucking officials who are literally making money off of our pain and misery. It's like, man, this country is full of people who actually just want brown and Asian people to suffer, and they don't actually care about government tyranny. Like they only care about government tyranny when it applies to white people. But if the government is like doing, you know, the Tuskegee experiments or about to coordinate a campaign to tarnish China and say all this stuff is China's fault, those people don't care if the government's doing that. But then if they want to come after their guns, which they're not, that's when they say they'll fight the government. So that's why I'm like, you know, I don't understand. Where the fuck is Joe Biden, number one?
Yeah, you know, he was. I think he made a TV appearance like 3 days ago.
I think that's the last time he's been seen on video.
Yeah,
Like, motherfucker, everybody's zooming right now.
Didn't Bernie like transition his campaign into like coronavirus support, and he's like completely refocused his entire.
Which all these people, I've been saying.
Why the hell hasn't this happened like for everyone else? Like every
Good
other.
Lord, man.
All these other politicians need to get off their asses and start like if they want to be president, they better do what Bernie's fucking doing right now, because otherwise they're just wasting their time showing us how they're going to respond to something like this. Bernie's showing us exactly how you're supposed to respond to this, and that's really weird. You know,
we don't need to be president to do it.
I know,
which is like that's what I've been saying this whole time.
I feel
like, hey, let's go support Bernie. He don't need to be president for us to support him doing this shit.
You know, I feel like I like Bernie. I wouldn't mind if he was president, but I also feel like he's best at being a domestic motivator and statesman, and
not a president.
The president is our true ambassador to the world. Mm-hmm. Like,
I don't personally think he would be the best one anyway.
I think that when No, I don't know. I think he'd be a really good domestic if he was like, the guy in charge of running the domestic policy. I think things would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think he's surrounded by a team that seems to be really in tune with what's happening on the ground.
Yeah.
And
If he was like Elizabeth Warren's Secretary of State, I feel like that would be the best.
that would work. But she didn't get enough votes.
It don't matter. I'm just saying, as far as like,
No, I'm just
what
saying, thinking in terms of like, it didn't matter because she didn't have enough support from.
No. But again, that's where just looking at the people who were talking about the most salient policies before all this shit happened. And then,
fucking Yang.
Well, I don't know if you saw, it's possible that Joe Biden offered him a position in his cabinet for his support, which is not legal.
What's he gonna do? Have him like double check his math or something?
I don't know, but they might have committed some fucking illegal
some fraud
act already. Which is like, that's not a good sign if those rumors are coming out.
Man,
If those are true.
It's funny because I remember like a week or so ago, there was a dialogue about, or people were expressing concerns over Trump canceling the election, which he doesn't have the authority to do.
No.
Congress has the authority to do that.
Yeah.
Congress can give him the right to do that if they pass some kind of legislation that gives him that power, but they still have to grant him the power to do that.
And then I think the Speaker of the House takes over.
Yeah, and so it's like first off, only Congress can cancel the election. Really,
Yeah.
It's not going to be like that. I mean, even if America went to war, they wouldn't stop the election.
No way.
Because the election is part of the economy. The election moves the economy in ways that very few other things can.
Well, there's not really a reason to stop it.
Yeah.
There's not, except because they're saying you can't do it electronically.
So here's the thing, and we've been talking about this on this show and in private and in passing and on the internet and in forums and all this stuff for years. There is this technology based off of Hyperledger, and it is a blockchain technology. And yes, this is very similar to what many people only know and recognize as cryptocurrency. And it does have a lot of the same technological underpinnings, but essentially it is a distributed ledger. It's a database, and it allows for a record to be created that is verified across an entire distributed network. So it's completely decentralized, and it makes sure that you can't commit fraud. You can't like double up. You can't use a fake. You could use a fake terminal, but if somebody was smart enough to create a system where you had to enter your social security number and other information into it, and it's all secure, it's all encrypted, because good luck decrypting this shit once it's finalized and processed. But there's a way to do this so that they can pull up real information for elections. And I remember seeing forums pop up that were all about fixing the election system, doing away with. There are a lot of ideas that seemed a little extreme, like completely trashing what we have. And we can hold on to what a framework for a little while until we figure out how to do this the right way. We don't want to just jump in with nothing. But There's a way to do this with a decentralized system that's distributed across the entire country, and where you may or may not have to go somewhere. We might be able to figure out how to do this over a phone. And you do it once, you fill out your information, and if you go back and you try to fill out that information with that, or you fill out cast a vote with that information again, it just pulls up your previous information, except it's obfuscated in some way. And there's a way to do this, and everyone can have access. It's time for those Obama phones.
Yeah,
exactly. Like anyone who doesn't have a phone, sign up for the Obama phone. It shouldn't be a problem. If China can give everybody a freaking phone.
India can do it.
India can do it. Like
they did it in at least one state.
Yeah.
I know they didn't do it everywhere, but they did it in at least one state.
But if these places can organize in such a way to give everyone a device that allows them to participate in like local election or to keep up to speed with breaking news, because that's
Well, an internet should be a free utility.
Yeah.
A public utility. Because what's happening right now is you're seeing people being forced to switch to online whatever, and then you have all these kids who don't have high-speed internet or a computer at home that aren't able to do schooling at home. So then you have organizations donating laptops to kids and shit, not realizing that those laptops are eventually just going to get stolen because those kids are in areas where somebody's going to see those laptops as an opportunity. And it's like, there's too many things that are problems that are associated with poverty that then the UBI and shit like that would alleviate, in that if people are getting $1,000 a month check, then they don't have to go steal the neighbor's fucking laptop that they just got from the kid's school and go sell it to pay their rent because they lost their job. And there's all these things where it's like,
well, there are families
the cascade effect of crime, and it's like, it's not always poor people committing crime. I'm not saying poor people commit crime, but a lot of crime is driven by poverty. And that's where, again, it's like a lot of the robberies are just robberies out of necessity, in that when people get desperate and they don't want to die, they start doing desperate shit, and then they start taking property and selling it because that's easier than dying. You know what I'm saying? And like when it's your life on the line, like, fuck yeah, you're gonna rob somebody and like do that rather than die. If it's either life and death or robbing somebody, they're not gonna die because they got too much shit. And when you're poor, you're gonna start seeing that person as a parasite and a vampire on society because they put you in a spot where they were gonna let you just die off, and they didn't look at help.
Right.
That's how it feels once you get so poor. Like, you would start wanting to burn shit down because you feel like everybody's ignoring you, because everybody's ignoring you collectively, even though you don't feel like, I'm not talking about you. An individual doesn't feel like they're ignoring poor people. They're ignoring poor people collectively with everybody else. And that's kind of why, again, as a society, until we fix that problem, we're all ignoring poor people. And I can talk about it, I'm still ignoring them.
What's interesting is that while you were talking about poor people, I just kept feeling like we are taught to ignore crazy people in school. Like in elementary school, like, oh, they're like, there's
don't look at them.
Don't look at them. There's just something off about this person. And even if it's another kid in school, just ignore them. They're just acting out. This is conditioning that it's initiated at a very early developmental stage, and it's really dangerous. And this is the kind of thing that shame on the people who think that this is a good idea. Like, I can't believe that somehow we've arrived at a point with a society that is so affluent and so egalitarian and all these other fancy words that make people feel good about things, but we still allow people to be marginalized. And not just that, but we teach our children to do it at a very early stage. So
that's exactly why we can't call it the Wuhan or Chinese flu or virus or whatever.
Yeah,
because that's the same kind of marginalizing.
Yeah, it has a name. It's called coronavirus, or COVID-19, or SARS-CoV-2.
Because that's why anybody who's Asian or looks even remotely Chinese is like under threat now because of fucking racist people who've been conditioned to react to in xenophobic manner. And it's like, we can't allow that xenophobia to control American dialogue or like the American consciousness anymore. And we're at a point where we can exercise that shit from the social consciousness. Like, the social consciousness is emerging as a body, and now we have to look at it and say what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. We're gonna fucking ostracize these people from here on out. If you wanted to like starve people and let them fucking like have to try to pay rent when they're losing their jobs, yeah, we're gonna remember that shit as a social consciousness. I think from here on out, like, we can't have the social consciousness of a goldfish, and we have to remember who's gonna fucking let people suffer, and that's like, we can't just forget that shit.
Yeah,
like there's no basketball to distract us from talking about that shit.
They canceled NASCAR. I think that tells us everything we need to know.
Exceptional radio.
NASCAR guy can't.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.